Hi BookTube, welcome to a Sideline video. And yes, you were promised a non-fiction review a few days ago in my last video. Let me tell you why that's not what you're getting today. I have regular viewers who live in so many different countries, and when I started the script for the review I intended for the non-fiction book I'd finished during June, I found myself asking, was this book written with an expected audience that might live outside the United Kingdom? And I had to acknowledge the answer was no, it really isn't. And it seemed to write a full review, therefore, was a little bit like not reading The Room, if I think of The Room as all of you who watch the channel Heather Reads and interact. What I can say about the non-fiction work that I was going to review is that it kind of falls into the same category as the audiobooks that I began consuming in June and are now, augmenting my print book consumption. Audiobooks, I think, have provided something in my reading that I didn't realize was lacking. But when I think about it, isn't it inevitable? All BookTube creators probably find that their reading is subtly changed by the fact that they do BookTube. And I maybe had never investigated or acknowledged how mine had changed. It's a subtle change, so maybe that's why. Because I want to assure everyone that the books that I've read and reviewed for BookTube, I have wanted to read and I have enjoyed, and yet they were also chosen with an awareness that I was going to present a full review to you all. And I now realize that there are a few books in my library or in my library's library that I wanted to read, but I didn't. I put aside or I ignored, and that was for a number of different reasons. And here are the reasons. Reason number one, the book has been extremely popular on BookTube. It's been reviewed and reviewed and reviewed, and I just didn't think I had anything new or would have anything new to bring to you about that particular book. Secondly, the book was written almost entirely for and specific to a United Kingdom audience. And three, my sole reason for wanting to read the book was enjoyment. It was something very light, and really it was to have a break from the kind of reading that naturally lends itself to full reviews. So let's say if you compared making BookTube content and choosing appropriate books, if that is like picking a road to travel on to get to a particular destination, then I think my audiobooks and also this nonfiction work that I just completed are a bit more like going off-road, because you want to get away from routine and because maybe you want to be a bit more relaxed while you read. So please consider this to be the inaugural video of a new kind of content, something that I think I'm going to prepare quarterly. And so this is my summer 2026 version. And it will be more of a check-in style, a presentation where I mention the books, but there's less structure to what I say about them and a lot more subjectivity. And it's going to be more like those monthly wrap-ups or weekly wrap-ups you see other content creators doing for all their reading. And so the first book that I want to talk about is, of course, this non-fiction work that I read as a print copy, and that is Walking Away by Simon Armitage. Now, Simon Armitage is the current UK Poet Laureate. He was appointed in 2019, and I think they now serve for just 10 years. It used to be arbitrary. I think they just served for the rest of their life from the date of appointment. But the Queen Elizabeth II changed that in the early 2000s, and they now serve for 10 years. And the only obligation that a UK Poet Laureate really has, there's kind of an expectation that on any important national occasion, they will write a poem. But I don't think that they're chosen necessarily because their poetry contains more content about the UK. I'm not sure about that. But at any rate, what Simon chose to do during his 10-year stint as laureate was to embark on 2 long-distance walking journeys along well-known UK footpaths. One is called the Pennine Way. Here is a map. Okay, and it goes north from the Peak District in Derbyshire right through to the Scottish border. And then his second journey, map, was west along the southwest coast path, which he started in Somerset and then took all the way down to Land's End and then spent a little time in the Scilly Isles. As Simon was walking, he wrote poetry, but also at every town where he stopped to stay overnight, he also gave a poetry reading. So Walking Away is the book which Simon Armitage wrote to talk about his journey along the Southwest Coast path. And I received the book as a Secret Santa gift, Christmas 2023. I never did find out which of my work colleagues was that Secret Santa, but I'm always grateful when my colleagues, they recognize how much I love to read and they give me something related like a book or a book token or a bookmark. I'm going to admit, though, that I was a little uneasy when I'd unwrapped the book and I read the back cover because I thought, uh-oh, this is travel writing. And I've had some bad experiences with travel writing in the past. And I admit I've actually avoided getting any more books in that genre. So credit to my Secret Santa for bringing travel writing back into my reading. I suppose the important thing for me with travel writing is I need the writer to come across as the kind of person I would actually like to travel with. And I enjoyed the time that I spent with Simon Armitage for 3 reasons. One, because Simon presents himself, and I hope he is like this in real life, he presents himself as slightly self-effacing, a little self-mocking. And secondly, because what he can do with language utterly delights me. I can't think of a better way to put it. I felt compelled to mark the book whenever Armitage created certain word pictures because they were so fresh, and I did this quite often. And thirdly, Armitage was honest about how much he needs time alone, and I could really identify with that. While he was walking the trail, of course, many people joined him to walk short pieces of it with him, and he gained a lot from those times with local people, but also he talked about how good it was when he was all by himself with just nothing but the landscape. I could so identify with that. I could read you so many examples of that beautiful wordplay that I mentioned. I'm going to pick one from page 87, and it's just this particular metaphor which I thought was so good, but again, may only be understandable for those in the UK, so I will explain it. He talks about how it's hard to go more than a few hundred yards along the Tarka Trail without the ting-ting of a bicycle coming up behind. Sometimes a lone senior citizen out for a pedal, sometimes a crocodile of kids wobbling along behind a teacher, sometimes Miss Marple with a wicker basket on her handlebars, and sometimes a peloton of hardcore racers who flash past in lycra leotards. Now, it's the word peloton. During COVID-19 lockdown, a new company started up called Peloton, and what they did was they would rent you an exercise bike that you could keep in your home or a treadmill, and that included a tablet with the treadmill that you could connect with an instructor who would take you through an exercise routine. These were extremely popular during and shortly after lockdown, and I think, unfortunately, the company went into administration because just not enough people kept on keeping on with the contracts when they all had to go back into offices, which a lot of people are now. I'm one of the few people that still has a full working from home contract. The descriptions of landscape in the book, of course, are very detailed. There's a lot of care and attention to both the expected and the unexpected. And for this reason, it seemed to me like a book that would be more appreciated by someone in the United Kingdom, or someone at least who'd spent some time in the southwest of the United Kingdom, enough to really recognize those bits and pieces that he pays so much attention to. And I did read the part where Simon was walking through Newquay, which is on the north coast of Cornwall, because we had a holiday there, and I recognized some of the places where he said he was walking because we'd done the same walks. And I'm going to finish this section by just mentioning my 2 favorite parts of the book. One was where someone shows Simon the tattoo that they had done on their ankle, which is a line from one of his poems, which reads, "What happens in the heart simply happens." I thought that was brilliant. I actually don't think I could ever be brave enough to have a tattoo, and I don't really like the idea of them. I'm that generation that kind of don't like them. But I was so tempted just because I love that line of poetry so much. And the second thing I liked was he gave a poetry reading in a tiny little village, in a village hall, and he stood at the entrance. As it happens, he was making conversation with the people who had arrived, and a lady came in and she thought that he was at the door to collect tickets, so she handed him hers. And he didn't flinch, he didn't argue about it. He just played the role perfectly. He tore her ticket in half and gave her the stub and welcomed her inside and told her to take a seat. And I just thought, again, that just shows how selfie-facing. There was a humility in there that I really liked. Okay, now we go on and we just cover the audiobooks that I read in June and a little bit in July as well. We start with Menopausing by Davina McCall. Now, Davina McCall is a UK television personality, and that's one of the reasons as well that I thought I'll just get the audiobook of this. I don't really want to review it in detail, but this book came out in 2022, and Davina also did a UK film for Channel 4 to break what I know from my own experience to be a silence and a social uneasiness about the subject of perimenopause and menopause, which meant that a lot of women don't know how to recognize their own symptoms, and many general practitioners, they aren't correctly diagnosing those symptoms either. The print version of the book, I'll show you some pictures now on screen. It's got a lot of, kind of summer romance colors going on and a font vibe and everything, lots of big round font. And Davina, she does do a lot of cheerleading. And I realized that this isn't going to be everybody's style, but the content, particularly the testimonials from other women, will be a huge source of comfort and solidarity to anyone else going through this time and having difficulty. And the medical information that was provided by the co-author, Dr. Naomi Potter, is plentiful and it's clearly presented. A lot of time has been taken to undo the damage caused by the estrogen progestin trial of 2002, which frightened women and their doctors away from using HRT as a treatment for perimenopause and menopause symptoms. And Davina herself admits that she actually publicly denied that she was taking HRT before her book was published, because that's how guilty she felt for taking it. But the advice given in the book is, and particularly the parts which talk about how to get medical help and what products are or aren't available on prescription. See, that's only going to be helpful for a UK reader. But in conclusion, every country needs a book like Menopausing, popular but written clearly with medical advice to help women so that they know what happens during perimenopause and menopause and what treatments work and how to approach medical staff to help them. Our county library was very good. They have pulled in about 11 print copies of this book, and they also have an ebook and an e-audiobook version available. So I'm pleased. Menopause for me is past tense, but I don't have good memories of how I was treated at the time, and I knew virtually nothing about how to help myself. And so I would like to see things improve in the future for younger women. Next audiobook was The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Richard Osman is another UK television personality, okay? A game show host who, as it happens, has a really warm, natural wittiness. And in 2021, he turned his hand to writing cozy mysteries. And whereas with some celebrities, you know how it is, you kind of doubt that they did any of the writing, or you think, oh, this isn't going to be very good. Because I'd watched and heard Richard Osman in front of the camera, sometimes improvising, and I thought, he's really quite good. I think he actually could write an entertaining piece of light fiction. And so I was interested because he'd written a series of 4 novels, starting with The Thursday Murder Club. Now, these books have sold like nobody's business, and library copies, yeah, they were plentiful, but they were always on reserve. Someone else had always signed them out. And so it's taken me until this time to finally be able to get hold of the e-audiobook version. And I wouldn't dare get into an argument with anybody as to whether these will or will not become classics. Will they still be known about in 50 years' time? I didn't read them with any thought about that. I just knew, I bet this guy can write an entertaining little story, and I was in the mood for that. I wanted to be fully entertained. The premise, if you would like to know, is that there are 4 seniors living in a luxury retirement village on the south coast of England, and they meet once a week to review cold case files. Now, you might think, well, where on earth did they get these? Well, they have access to these files because one of their long-term residents, named Penny, was a chief constable when she was working, and she kept copies of everything, apparently. Bear in mind, this is a light fictional scenario, so she kept copies of all her cold case files, and she took them with her when she retired. And her best friend, Elizabeth, is a person she's got the kind of brain that wasn't really made for retirement, and she needs food for thought. I mean, serious food for thought and action and planning, and that's what this book provides. And the whole cast of characters, they do have some comic predictability. It's absolutely true. But I would say that Richard Osman does manage to flesh them out a little better than some people do comic characters, and it makes them really satisfying to meet and get to know. If you are fond of the British television series Midsummer Murders or Agatha Christie's Miss Marple or Poirot, then I think you would enjoy the Thursday Murder Club. It was pure fun, well plotted, and I truly enjoyed myself. And the last audiobook was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, and this was read by the actress Miriam Margolyes, really lovely reader of books. And there was a British radio comedy show long before I arrived. In fact, it was made the year I was born, in 1964, and the program was called I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again. John Cleese, who was later of Monty Python fame, he was one of the cast. And he said this in a skit. The whole crew was doing a skit about Alice in Wonderland, and he wasn't playing along properly, and he was told off, and he responded by saying about the book Alice in Wonderland that it's a pretentious, boring, overrated, clapped out, highly suspect, Victorian load of old. And then he used a word that I didn't recognize, but I imagine it's a synonym for being worthless, okay? He also said that he never met a child who liked it, okay? The person who watches television introduced me to this radio comedy, and we've listened to all the episodes over and over and over, so I remembered John Cleese never liked Alice in Wonderland, or so he said on the radio episodes, and I'd never read it as a child. And even when I took the children's literature course with the Open University, yes, they kind of mentioned it, because, you know, it has a place in the history of children's literature, but it wasn't one of our set text. We didn't have to read it at all. And with university courses, there's always way too much assigned reading. You don't have time to sort of augment that with something that happens to be, you know, quickly mentioned in your textbooks. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was browsing in my library app because I'd finished my last audiobook, and I thought, I'm really enjoying these. These are a nice supplement to my print books for the reasons I've talked about. And there was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and I thought, oh. And then I saw Miriam Margolyes' name, and I thought, oh, she is so entertaining. I imagine she's going to be a fantastic reader. Now, the only thing I will say, having finished this audiobook, is that my opinion of Miriam Margolyes remains as fantastic as it ever was. She's just an amazing reader. She did wonderful voices and sound effects that really kept me engaged. But as far as Alice in Wonderland itself is concerned, I'm so afraid, but I now fully agree with John Cleese. I'm afraid I think it is boring and it is overrated, even as a children's book. I gather that maybe for a child, all the repetition of imagery and the repetition of the same situation, you know, Alice growing big, then small, then big, then small, then big, then small. Yeah, perhaps that would be entertaining, but I couldn't imagine liking it myself, even when I was younger. I did smile at the odd bit of wordplay. Yeah, that was definitely there. But the nonsense was kind of tedious. You know, the way nonsense is, like when a child tells a joke or says something they think is funny, and you laugh with them, and then what they do is they just keep telling the same joke over and over and over again. And to them, that's still utterly hilarious. But to the adults in the room, you're sort of rolling your eyes and hoping you can distract that child and start doing something else that's more interesting. I really apologize to anyone out there who has loved Alice in Wonderland. It didn't work. It didn't work at all for me. That's my subjective truth. And that is the account of all my off-road reading for summer 2026. Join me again in October when we'll do another one of these, and I may film it from a special location. So watch out for that. And speaking of special locations, if you stick around after I sign off, there will be another short video from my Vancouver trip. And I'm going to close now by just saying, I hope you're all having good reading, whatever that means to you, and I'll see you again in a few days' time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right, here we are inside the Tulip Festival near the big Dutch clog that I had to take a picture of. I just want to get closer to the flowers so you can see there's just so many different colors. I'm really enjoying. These are our favorite flowers for myself and Peter. We love tulips. So it's really nice to see the varieties. We used to have in the UK a tulip festival not far from us, but it's no longer happening. And so that was the other reason why when my sister said, oh, there's a tulip festival here, we said, really? We gotta go. We gotta see all the flowers coming out. So yeah. Well, I think we're just starting now because I can see the fields in the distance. Can you see the stripes of color there? We're probably going to go out there and see just what kind of varieties they're growing.